welcome to Designing for the Desert Sustainable Building Strategies for Arid Regions. I'm Udit Mehta, Director of Green Grid Designs, and I'm your host for this webinar series. Today, we're joined by Dr. Bhakti More, architect, educator, researcher, and sustainability advocate, who has just shared her perspectives on climate conscious design education, the UAE's net zero journey, and emerging technologies and the future skills needed to shape that next generation of sustainable designers. With that,
Industry from 2019 uh, data, which is about 62 metric ton carbon dioxide. The ambition is to reduce it to 1. So that means there is a lot of innovation, research, newer ways to adopt to reduce these targets in our industry. And then to achieve that, it happens in process where you can look at the intermediate targets, and there is the 18% target for 2030, 60, and then 200%. And the ambitious journey of the net zero 2050, especially the energy sector, there has been a lot of transformation if you consider the 2017 data to what where we are today. And COP28, which UAE hosted in uh, the time when it was very important to come up with newer technologies. There were discussions around nature-based solutions and what all stakeholders can together achieve in this transformation journey. Here we are at today in a city which is very dynamic and vibrant, and we've seen the transformation over past many decades. And currently, in the recent months, there was something called Dubai It Trans as Dubai It was launched, which says that there's exceptional achievement over a short period of time, and we see that the transformation of an urban development of a city has been very historic to see that in the last 3 decades how the city has been evolved with a lot of urban development. And what we learn from the tradition is always very inspirational. So where there were no technology as such, but there were a lot of passive designs that helped us to understand the buildings, how they would be designed in a desert climate. And we have learned from wind towers, traditional architecture, courtyards, the way materials were used, window designs, and looking at even overall the fenestration and how people were still comfortable and how thermal comfort was achieved in harsh climates. And with the construction industry in its rapid transformation, there is a lot of other important aspects to be now considered in today's time. And most important for architects is how do we address embodied carbon when we actually start on even concept design to consider on materials, construction, technology as how they are derived from its raw source and entire life cycle of the materials in the construction process and even till the end of the life cycle. Whereas the operational carbon does also connect to how we design, but it's also important to address the services part of it, where we decide on the heating and cooling systems, the lighting technologies, again, mechanical ventilation system, and overall how much the operational carbon would be and what could be our role in even reducing that. So this was one of data, which is the influence of all the stakeholders across the building life cycle. And you can see that the role of architects is very high in upfront carbon. And definitely that's how the building design is now become very important. And the decisions that we make are going to impact when it comes to the entire building life cycle. And definitely, though our role in operational carbon may be not as high as in upfront carbon, but definitely there is a responsibility of how the entire life cycle of the building would be. And there are again, if all the stakeholders come together, we can achieve the transition towards net zero for a more energy efficient future. And I'm going to show you some examples and how innovation can play a role. So this is Al Bahar Towers in Abu Dhabi by RAS Architects, and these were systems that were developed on facade, and facade becomes a very integral part when it comes to the solar gain in a climate of UAE, where if it is designed in the right way, it can really do intense reduction. And this particular examples where this mashrabia type of structures were developed, this has almost given a 50% of a reduction in the solar gain. And how is it done? Is it is with the use of computational design. So definitely there are ways to do the right dynamic facades. So these facades are developed in such a way that they respond to the solar gain. And more important is that the comfort that the users have achieved in the indoor spaces is an example that indicates that innovation can really play an important role. And these are some of the images how these dynamic systems have worked, and use of the right material, which is the PTFE material for the facade. And this is an example and received several awards for this project. This is another example, and this is a recent building by UN Studio, the Vassal Towers. And very important note on this is that sustainability with the twist. So you can see the dynamic shape of this building. So it is designed to address 360 degrees of the solar gain. And the ceramic cladding on the facade, you can see some of the images here, responds to the solar gain. And again, there is a reduction, almost a considerable reduction when it comes to the heat gain. And there are again simulations and a lot of technology and software available to see that this can really achieve efficiency. And in terms of numbers, so years back, as architects, we were not looking at these kind of numbers, but today it's important to understand impact. So where you can see here, there's a 40% reduction in the energy. Again, there is also 20% reduction in the wind loads. And this is possible when there's an integration of the system thinking to the passive design. This is another example of the sustainable city, which is the C Institute. It's a research institute. And all these images have numbers, which talks about what the design has achieved at the end. So there is reduction when it comes to the energy efficiency through use of the right material. So in this particular project, they have used the concrete, which also has a less GHG, and then use of biogas plant and hybrid cooling system to achieve the overall embodied carbon reduction by 26%. And very interesting, on the parking areas, there are bifacial solar panels. So how innovation can really contribute towards the net zero emission building. And during Expo, there were many buildings, Expo 2020 Dubai, there were many buildings which were recycled, and Malaysia Pavilion is one of the example where 75% is upcycled. So it is possible when you use the right material. And yeah, this is again the C Institute, where overall on the left side you will see the passive elements used, where the construction materials, the modular systems, lightweight facades, recycle content is contributing towards the passive design. Whereas on the right side you will see the active system, which is the PV systems, the also a lot of the technological aspects that integrates with the passive system to achieve the net zero target, and you're looking at the 2030. This is one example where, with a cost effective design, you can really achieve the almost the energy efficiency of 100% renewable energy with 72% of reduction. This are the Masdar villas in Abu Dhabi. And 90% of it is the use of locally sourced material. So, how do we see a benchmark where you can achieve over traditional villas? And this is the world's smartest and largest net zero building, the Dubai Electricity Water Authority headquarters, the Al Shira, and this year the building is completed, and it's a amazing example where the building connects or communicates with also the users. I'm just going to show a video. This is one of the earlier video, which is at the concept level. So this building communicates with a lot of systems, and it's that's why there's an integration of AI and the cognitive systems. So when we talk about a net zero building, the passive and the active system both integrate together. And definitely, as architects, if we do a lot of work in the passive system, the active systems dependency is going to be quite less. And the whole pathway to the net zero starts with the building geometry, and hence the role of many technologies, many tools come into importance here, because how do you even achieve the building facades fenestration for passive strategies till you then integrate the active systems? And very important are these four areas where we talk about livability, sustainability, resilience, and affordability when it comes to the future of a real estate for any city. And smart buildings are very important today because it addresses not just the energy efficiency, but more important, the health and well being of the occupant, how the systems are integrated into the building. And it can help in achieving the energy efficiency and overall even reduction in even the carbon footprint. This is another example of ICD Brookfield by Foster and Partners. So this building creates a microclimate within the space inside, where it acts as a space for social cohesion, and at the same time creates a comfortable space for the user within the building. And more important that it also has a reduction of 20%, 28% over the industry standards. And Expo City Dubai is an example of a smart city, and the Terra Pavilion, which is an important example to understand how a microclimate can be created when you have harsh climates in the outdoors. and that is with help of building form, integrating technology together with the systems, and having also some strategies like going below the ground where you see more cooling, and consider even the urban heat island effect, which is important to be mitigated. So, when we talk about smart systems and smart cities today, it's also important to understand digital twin. And Dubai has launched the digital twin platform, so which helps to take informed decision, do predictive analysis, and at the end, it will definitely enhance the quality of life. And there are many examples that talk about role of systems in iconic buildings, and how we can adopt to those technologies to consider thermal comfort and also have overall comfort for every user. The Dubai 2040 master plan definitely is important for us to understand what is the strategy on community development, because as architects and master planner, a crucial role is to not just design a building, but how the building is integrated overall in the community to enhance economic and environmental sustainability, to create more green spaces, increase and enhance as the city is growing, and overall look at also preserving the culture and heritage as we move forward in the master plan. So the dimensions of towards net zero is not just design technology, but education and workforce, to then consider even innovation and ecosystems. So when we look at 2050, targets, which many countries have, it's important to upskill the new generation for them to address to the newer challenges of climate change. And one of the example as universities we could do is consider our own climate action plan, because involving students and faculties and even our facilities team can help achieving climate audits and come up with strategies, because universities can be living labs to help students for the entire learning process. And today we talk about not sustainability. Sustainability has gone, beyond that is ESG. And design education, when we're talking about today passive design, it's important to look at carbon literacy and consider all of these aspects, which I mentioned here, because it's important that students look at circularity, understand the concepts onto energy modeling, adaptive reuse. So there could be projects in some of these areas on how you can also consider older buildings and then look at newer uses of the building. So instead of completely demolishing the building, can one of maybe a old school building be reused as a cultural center, and such kind of projects can really be interesting for students. And we also look at retrofitting, as it's not just new buildings, but also retrofitting the old is essential. The social aspect in the ESG is we do consider in curriculum universal design and inclusive design, but today also there are neurosciences, neurodiversity, where how your space connects and makes user more, I think, comfortable, and urban and cultural resilience, along with participatory design approach is essential. And definitely the equality, diversity, inclusivity aspects are important part of design programs. And then is not just about sustainability, but it's about ethical approach in the design, where you can have measurable aspects, frameworks, ESG reporting, green building certification, regulatory compliance. So design is a lot more beyond aesthetics, and how is it responsible, what is the role of a designer to create that responsible decisions, whether it's in the procurement of materials, construction, supply chain, and how do you do the overall compliance, and cost and finance are integral factors here. This was one of the project Solar Decathlon, which we participated, and this was during the COVID when the project was launched. It delayed But at the end, there were 40 universities. On the 8 universities could build, and this was the home team Tawazun, and there were about 80 students from different disciplines who participated in the project, and students were involved in building the project, and they had to then dismantle the project. So that means you have to consider materials that are not wasted, and how you could look at different technologies. So we were looking at creating shadings in some of the areas where they worked on simulations, considering recycled materials. So which again focus on the circular economy aspects. And the house has to generate its energy. The students need to monitor that, and there were industry partners. So we had around 25 academic partners and 25 industry partners, and the house has to be operational. So this kind of projects are definitely great learning experiences for students, because it is uh, a live example. You have a live data, and you're involved in every decision making when you design and get involved in these projects which are outside of the curriculum. This is one of the project submitted for a multi-comfort competition, where students had to use construction and materials to do life cycle assessment, to overall see the impact at the master planning level, and consider the appropriate materials. So this was cross laminated timber, and how do you do structural design with it, and look at various aspects. So there was thermal comfort, acoustical comfort, visual comfort, and at the same time come up with your metrics, your overall dashboard of how you've achieved it. And this is again example of what opportunities students can get while they are in their the curriculum, and then how as graduates, when they are working on life projects, such kind of projects really help and guide them to also build up the portfolio, which helps them in future. And this is life cycle assessment through one click LCA. And this is another project which was a live project. So there was a four-star hotel in Dubai, and we've signed an NDA, so cannot disclose the name, but we actually worked with the client to give them solutions on technology and innovation, and include all the system. There was also digital twin that the students group worked on, and to create a climate resilience solution, to give them how they can also look at embodied carbon and operational carbon for energy efficient solutions. And one of the factor was creating an innovation, which we created a robotic system that is integrated in their BMS, and create all the measurable impact to understand what decisions they could take. And coming to the last part of the presentation is, we are definitely talking today about AI and architecture, and AI is very, very important to be integrated to every design process that students or as architects we are part of, because AI can help us or accelerate the process for the bigger problems that we have in terms of urban heat island, mitigating the climate impact, understanding what building geometry can help in making the climate responsive architecture. And today there are many tools which can be introduced in the curriculum to help students to understand that everything that they design needs to be more responsible, more meaningful, to create spaces within the city, and also address the circular economy, because it is right now probably not mandatory, but in future everything that you do is going to have a compliance. So every material that you is used should be having an environmental product declaration, and also is adhering to all the compliances. Every business in future will be mandatorily reporting their ESG goals. So this is about not just for their compliances, but also as mandatory requirement. and it will help them to attract investors and commit to all the sustainability goals they have, and also to see that they are more responsible in their businesses. And there are many reporting frameworks that are there. There are also ratings that are part of ESG. And accountability is important while we address the SDG goals. So I'm going to end my presentation with a very important quote that human beings don't have a pollution problem, they have a design problem. And if we devised everything that we do, whether it's product, tools, furniture, and homes, more intelligently, then definitely we don't even need to think in terms of the waste or contamination. So, good design would always allow for abundance, endless reuse, and pleasure. So, I'll end my presentation with this, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bhakti, for a very thought-provoking presentation. Um, One of the things that really resonated with me was how you connected the past, the present, and the future of design into one continuous story. And uh, we started with traditional desert architecture and the climate responsive wisdom that has been here for generations. And also how we then looked at today's net zero emissions and the reshaping of the built environment. So I really liked how that flowed and kind of also took us through that complex evolutionary process, and also how we finally looked at the future designers and what they will navigate as the world gets more and more complex. Um, I also appreciated your specific emphasis on how sustainability is not just a technical exercise or a compliance requirement. It's a way of thinking that one, influences every design decision, from the materials up to the energy performance and technology as well. So, thank you for sharing those insights and also for reminding us that achieving net zero isn't only about better buildings, it's also about educating people who will design them. So, uh, for all of those who may have joined a little later, welcome to Designing for the Desert Sustainable Building Strategies for Arid Regions. I'm Udit Mehta, Director of Green Grid Designs, and I'm your host for this webinar series. Today, we're joined by Dr. Bhakti More, architect, educator, researcher, and sustainability advocate, who has just shared her perspectives on climate conscious design education, the UAE net zero journey, and emerging technologies and the future skills needed to shape that next generation of sustainable designers. With that, we'll now move into the discussion portion of today's session. I'll spend the next few minutes in conversation with Dr. Bhakti, exploring some of the themes from her presentation in a little more depth. So, my first question is about traditional wisdom and modern design. So, you began by talking about the traditional desert architecture and the lessons that we can learn from passive cooling, courtyards, wind towers, and climate responsive design. So, in a world where we're moving towards more and more of technology-driven solutions, are we at a risk of overlooking some of the centuries-old solutions? And what can today's designers continue to learn or continue to integrate? How could they maybe do that and not let forget or lose some of the old wisdom?
Yeah, so very interesting question. And technology can be really overwhelming. And especially, I see that with students sometimes they're like, oh, this is giving me a lot of solutions. But it's very important to know that architecture has always been evolved from the traditional and heritage culture. So, how people lived in those times is also important to understand the way of how they lived sustainably. And they are all very inspiring example when we talk about the materials that were used in past, the their spaces, how they integrated together socially and made climate responsive architecture. So it's important that we do not just look at technology today, but use the technology with the inspiration from the past for the solutions of the future. So always tradition has given us a lot of lessons to learn and continue with those lessons when we can. Technology is more to enhance what we have learned and to do things much better, but all the learning comes from the past.
Right, right. Fantastic. So now coming to my next question, um, UAE and the Net Zero 2050 challenge. Um, you also spoke about how this is the vision that the government has, and from your perspective, what is the most important role architects and designers will play in translating this national ambition into measurable action on projects?
So I think most important role, if you ask me, the architects have a lot of responsibility when it comes to the greenhouse gas emission. So it's almost like a 40% what contribution that happens in the built environment for everything that comes as a development. So it's important to design with carbon because that's very, very relevant.
Hmm.
Design with all the stakeholders because sometimes, because of a lot of consultants coming later on the board, it takes a lot of time to integrate things. So, system thinking is the key where all the stakeholders, whether it's your structural consultant, whether the MEP services, whether the developer, if everyone is on the same page, I think the role of architect would be much easier because we always dream. We know we are very creative people, but at the same time, how can even the other experts help us to have a more sustainable design? I think that's one area that working together with all the stakeholders can enhance our role.
Absolutely right, right. So, so having everyone who's involved have a say, having everyone's inputs taken into account, even the end user maybe as one of the stakeholders to participate in some way during these design processes could
Yeah, and
actually.
absolutely, even the resources, whether it is
Hmm,
water, energy, also to be considered even at the concept stage,
hmm,
because those services or those areas they are not coming after the concept stage. It is important how you work together at the concept with the resources, particularly with the construction technologies, with the right appropriate materials. How do you source those materials? So all this together, it's a holistic approach towards how we can integrate everything.
absolutely. So there's so much to learn from each other. I would say when these different parts speak to each other, then there can be larger clarity on where we're headed and the ambition can be realized. So, coming to education and design education, one of the themes that was running through your presentation was about this education aspect uh, where universities and design schools embed sustainability. So, how can this embedding of sustainability into the curriculum without actually limiting or putting a limit on the creativity and innovation aspects? How how would that how could that be done?
Yeah, so always it's important to evolve the curriculum with what's happening in the industry. Industry works at such a rapid and fast pace because newer things come in. There are new ways of looking at how you even do your role as an architect. So when you see curriculum, it's also important to integrate live projects within the curriculum because they are the ways to learn for the students and understand that whatever they are considering in the theory is when it comes into practice, how impactful can it be? And when they work with industry partners and also collaborate. So collaboration is the key when it comes to the curriculum. And there are also examples where when students go on site, talk to real clients, understand their requirements. I think that's the best way of learning. So curriculum should look at practical ways of delivery and also see what industry today wants to, and make students more think rather than just do it as a even a course in the curriculum, but how can they be critical thinkers and think beyond what is there in the curriculum, give opportunities that can really complement what they are learning. So I think that is for me it's very important when students actually do. It's doing by learning, so that makes a difference.
Right, right, right. So exposing them to what's actually happening, and I think there's so many examples around. There's so many constructions happening today that there's no dearth of example site visits or real life examples to actually get exposed as a student, and I think that really would kind of show them how things can be done, what the possibilities are, and of course, staying curious and keeping an open mind and learning and not feeling like one knows everything at any point. And of course, as you said, learning by doing. So, super. Moving to my next question, which is about future skills for students. So, if you were advising a student graduating in the next 2 or 3 years, what green skills or competencies would you tell them to develop in order to remain relevant in this rapidly evolving, UAE built environment?
So I would first always advise any student what is something that they do in their daily life which is sustainable. I think if as a person you are sustainable,
Sorry, I think we just lost you there for a second.
understanding best practices, but important
Sorry,
for them.
I think we just lost you there for a second.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'll just repeat the question once very quickly about advice for a graduating student in the next 2, 3 years. How would they stay up to date with UAE's rapidly evolving built environment in order to stay relevant?
Yeah. So I would definitely advise student as an individual, how are they in terms of their sustainability metrics. So if they themselves can change the way they live, I think any project that they do or anything that they are involved can be sustainable. So it's a self conscious decision, and that can help in their work. So, green skills are something that can be learned. You've got certifications, got workshops, seminars, but it's very important to have the consciousness within you to be more sustainable. And the
Hmm.
skills will always follow. So that decision is very important. And I always I'm amused with the way the even generation thinks now, and they also advise others to think. So whatever projects I've been involved, it is because of the students group who were very conscious on sustainability. So whether it was solar decathlon or whether it was any other project, it was always a decision and the interest and the passion that came from a group of students. So when you have that, I think you will always get to opportunities to also learn all these green skills. So it is a conscious decision that is very important.
Wonderful. So sustainability starts at home, and absolutely, I think that's the immediate impact or the direct impact that one can make. without depending on anyone else. So that would really help to kind of also start thinking about these in a more deep and thinking about where waste goes or why do we need so much energy and all of these kind of questions at the absolute fundamental level. So that's a great answer. Um, Moving to my next question, which is about something that everyone's talking about, which is AI. And you highlighted digital twins, smart buildings, AI, and emerging technologies in your presentation. So, how do you see AI changing the way architecture and design should be taught over the next decade?
So, AI is something that is a very important tool to be integrated in the design education. So, we cannot leave it aside. It has to be introduced. And I think students are, I would say, they're natives of the digital world. They learn AI much faster than anybody. And for them, they have to understand how to use AI ethically. How do you use AI to enhance your work? And at the same time collaborate with AI with your creativity. So the human creativity and AI have to work together. It's not only AI, and we can use AI for also giving us a lot of important informed decisions. So when today we talk about master planning, we talk about city climate responsive architecture or urban heat island and emerging cities, a role of AI is going to be important because we will be complementing all decisions on what AI is also predicting. So AI can even give you solutions on how do you plant trees, what will be the shading that will be available. So design education has to involve AI in the curriculum and give a lot of orientation on the appropriate use of AI in integrating towards design.
Absolutely. And following from that, actually, a further question to that is about how do we, or which are the human skills, which are distinctly human skills that we would want to protect for, our institutes or the way we teach in schools. Which are those distinctly human aspects that one would want to protect or strengthen as a design school or university to kind of keep that balance and to make sure that both aspects are somewhere addressed and built.
Yeah, definitely. It's important to have some of the skills which are human. One of them is empathy. If you have empathy, you can design for the users. As architects, I think that's very important skill. The other is collaboration. How do you collaborate and work in teams? How do you become flexibility is one important, adaptability, because things are changing, everything is so dynamic. So how do you adapt to everything that comes new and changes that happen? So adaptability, flexibility, and lifelong learning, because there's no end to that. So all these skills are very important. Emotional intelligence, because it's a very dynamic setting when it comes to workplaces of the future. So all these skills are important for graduates of today, and I think this is something that universities can also nurture, because when students involve in projects, they come together as teams, they can really learn all of these skills.
Absolutely wonderful. So I think, yeah, everyone's heard that these are the aspects to really nurture in oneself in order to be a good designer, and AI can never replace some of these things. Okay, now moving to my next question, and something that came up towards the end of your presentation, where you shared the hotel retrofit case study and discussed some of the regenerative approaches. So, how can we encourage the industry to move beyond simply reducing harm and start creating projects that actively restore the some of the harm that's already done, or restoring just restoring the environmental value on the property, which also then also regenerate social value and those aspects along it.
For the stakeholders and particularly the owners, it's important to understand return on investments. It's about also numbers. It's also about what innovation can do to existing properties, how it can enhance their asset management. So it's the way you convince them, it's through all the strategies. So retrofitting is going to be very important in future because when we talk about 2050, there'll be an old stock of buildings. And by replacing a lot of old systems, when you're replacing with the newer system, what is something that you're achieving in the cost? Cost, green finances, that's where a very important discussion now, because how do you get that finance to retrofit and help to achieve even overall your carbon footprint? So it's always a number and metrics that work. And once people understand, I think that will really help in creating the retrofitting for a lot of areas in the built environment. And adaptive reviews is also one aspect because there are many areas, and especially in many parts of the world, adaptive reuse is very widely used, where you already have, it's going to also save your carbon footprint. And it can, the creativity here matters is how you can create a different user space from one space. So reuse of buildings is also very important.
All right. So now coming to my final question, which is a question that looks out to the future and maybe not just 2025, but maybe all the way up to 2050. If we are educating designers for 2050, what is one thing that design schools must change or think about differently today in order for us to, make designers that are ready for the 2050 vision?
Design schools have a very big responsibility because they are creating thinkers. So critical thinking is important when it comes to graduates, and how they can have responsible designers, not just designers, who are responsible for social aspects, the social impact, environmental impact, and economical impact for the built environment. So I think most important is to have responsible graduates.
All right, superb. So, on that note, thank you very much for joining us on a Sunday and spending some time talking to our viewers. Um, Thank you for sharing not only your insights as an educator and a researcher, but also as a very practical perspective on how sustainability, technology, and design education must evolve together if we're serious about achieving that net zero future. All right, so let's open the floor for questions. And in case there are any questions, they can drop them in the chat. And we try to get as many questions as possible before we close for today. We just give another 1 minute. And then after that, if we do have more questions in the future, I will also share them with you and you can
Sure.
always respond to them.
think there is a question: how important is industry-based learning in, there's a question, preparing students to address real-world net zero challenges? So I would say that so it's an important question also, I would say, because net zero is it involves a lot of overall approach. It's not just in the design phase, but it's overall in every aspect of the projects. So when we collaborate with industry, and that is what exactly happened, Solar Decathlon is about designing a net zero home. And because we had so many industry partners, it was a great learning, because every industry partner had a collaboration on thinking on innovation. And research and innovation is important as we go towards net zero. The thing more important is that such kind of projects have to be done with industry collaboration, because you can see that how in practice, when you have life projects, this can really help. So for preparing students, this role of industry and academic partners also, so some of them were knowledge partners and some of them were actually partners who collaborated for equipments or even systems. So we in fact have also published some of the research which is in collaboration with these industry partners. So it's absolutely essential to do this collaboration.
All right, thank you. Let's just see if there are any more questions. All right, so I think that's the only question we got so far. And I'm sure there'll be more questions coming up in the next week as we share snippets of this very interesting conversation with Professor Mori. Um, all right, so if there's anything else you'd like to say before I close, Dr.
So I would say that I enjoyed the conversation. It is something that is, I think, very important for us as educators to be part of. And thanks for the opportunity for inviting me here.
Wonderful. So, on behalf of Green Grid Designs, thank you, Bhakti, for sharing your insights with us today. And thank you, everyone who joined the conversation. We hope today's discussion has sparked new ideas about sustainability, education, technology, and the future of our profession. Until next time, stay curious, stay climate conscious, and keep designing with purpose. Thank you.
Thank you.